The air in the memorial hall was thick and heavy, smelling of lilies and old grief. I could feel the eyes of my sister Khloe on me from across the room. She was a flashy real estate agent who thrived on being the center of attention, and even here she was performing, her face a perfect mask of contrived sympathy. A subtle vibration against my palm drew my eyes down. My husband Leo's name was on the screen. The message was short. A simple warning that confirmed what I already knew. Don't react. Your sister Isis recording you. I took a slow, steadying breath, my expression unchanged. My thumb moved with practiced deliberation, typing a single 5-letter word. Raven. I hit send. In the crushing silence, a sound rippled through the room. Not a word, but a synchronized movement. Men in dark, well-fitted suits rose to their feet, in perfect, unnerving unison. They didn't speak. They simply stood. A silent wall of disciplined power. A collective gasp swept through the moorers as their heads turned, following the invisible lines of force that all pointed back to me. I watched as Khloe's face, once so smug and confident, collapsed into pure panicked confusion. Her trap had just sprung on her. It had started an hour before in the small anteroom where I was trying to comfort my distraught mother. Khloe had burst in, not to help, but to complain, her voice sharp enough to cut glass. She was furious that I was scheduled to give a eulogy for our father. In front of his oldest business partners, she pointed a finger at me, her voice dripping with condescension. You don't get it, Aris. You with your boring government desk job. You don't understand real-world pressure or what Dad was really about. She thought she was landing a familiar blow, another entry in the long ledger of my perceived failures. For her, I was still the quiet, intellectual girl who never quite measured up. The dismissive pat on the head, the praise for her killer instinct while my accomplishments were ignored. It all echoed in that one sentence. She smiled, thinking she had won. You should just sit and let the adults handle this. A cold fury, quiet and absolute, settled in my gut. She wasn't just insulting me. She was trying to professionally neutralize me before the reading of the will. She wanted me to be seen as insignificant. An emotionally fragile child. She thought she was setting a trap, hoping to record an emotional outburst to prove I was unstable. She had no idea she was the primary target of a threat assessment I'd authorized an hour ago. To understand why my husband's entire SEAL team was at my father's funeral, you have to understand the war. She started long before he died. To see me in my family's world was to see a ghost at a feast. The memory that defined it all was a family dinner years before my father's passing. The air was thick with the scent of roasted chicken and Khloe's perfume. My father, a man who measured worth in decib and dollar signs, raised his glass. He launched into a booming toast for my sister, celebrating a big real estate commission she'd just earned. He praised her killer instinct, her ambition, her drive. Everyone applauded, their faces turned towards Khloe, the golden sun, around which our family orbited. When the noise died down, I cleared my throat, my voice feeling small in the sudden quiet. I mentioned almost as an apology that I had just been published in a prestigious national security journal. My father turned to me, his smile wavering for a second. He gave my arm a condescending pat. That's nice. Sweetie, all that reading. He looked back at the table, his voice booming again. But Khloe is out there in the real world making things happen. Khloe shot me a triumphant smirk from across the table. In that moment, I didn't just feel the sting of his dismissal. I felt the weight of the internal ledger, every past entry flashing in my mind. The science fair project he missed for her soccer game. The student loans I had to secure on my own because her new car was more important. The 10 years of money is tight that never seemed to apply to her. I just nodded, a polite smile fixed on my face. While inside, a quiet, cold voice simply said, "Of course, this is how it is." Now compare that to my other world. A world they couldn't even imagine. Picture a room with no windows. Deep inside the Pentagon, the only light comes from the glow of a massive screen. The only sound, the quiet hum of filtered air. In this room, I wasn't Aris, the disappointing daughter. I was Raven, a senior intelligence analyst for the DIA. On the screen were the hard, tired faces of a Tier 1 unit broadcasting from a dusty, undisclosed location thousands of miles away. Among them was my husband, Leo, a man they called Aris, the leader of the SEAL team, and someone who knew the real me. He wasn't just my partner. He was an operational asset who valued my mind more than my father ever had. I wasn't there as a wife offering support. I was their strategist, giving the final brief for a critical mission. My voice was calm, authoritative, and clear. "Well, be leveraging their confirmation bias," I explained, pointing to a diagram on the screen. "The primary target is psychologically profiled as a classic narcissist. So, we exploit his ego. We make him think our move is his idea." I looked directly at the camera. At my husband, Aris. "Your team is the kinetic element, the fist, but my intel is what guides that fist to the target. My intel is what gets you home." There were no condescending pats on the head here. There was only silence, focus, and the quiet, absolute respect of the most dangerous men on the planet. They listened. They nodded. And when I was done, Leo's voice came back crisp and clear. "Sope, Raven, we move on your word." That was the life I built for myself. Brick by silent brick in a world far away from my family's judgment. A world they couldn't touch, couldn't belittle, couldn't even comprehend. The isolation was necessary. A truth reinforced every time I had to speak with my mother. Carol, a woman who believed that peace at any price was a worthy goal, even if I was the one who always paid. I remember calling her a few months before Dad passed after Khloe had sabotaged a career opportunity for me out of sheer spite. I was looking for something. Support. Maybe understanding. Instead, I got a tired sigh. "Aris, please," she had whispered into the phone. "Just let Khloe have this. You know how she is. It's just easier for everyone, if you keep the peace. Easier for everyone." Those words echoed in my head. Easier for them to sacrifice my peace for their comfort. It was in that moment I understood with chilling clarity that I was utterly alone in that family. They were not my tribe. My tribe was the group of quiet professionals who trusted me with their lives. My family was the one I had earned, not the one I had been born into. That phone call was the final entry in the ledger. It was the moment I stopped trying to earn their love and started planning for the inevitable conflict. For years, I had tried to speak their emotional language, hoping they'd finally see me, but they only respected one thing: dominance. So, I decided I would finally speak to them, in the only language they understood. The night my father died, the house was filled with a strange, hollow silence. But my sister, Khloe, was anything but silent. I could hear her in the other room, her voice a low, urgent murmur on the phone, not to grieving relatives, but to lawyers. She was already maneuvering, staking her claim, treating our father's death as the opening bell for a race to the inheritance. I sat perfectly still on the sofa, watching her silhouette move behind the door, and I felt nothing. The grief was there, a deep, cold ocean inside me. But on the surface, there was only observation. I was no longer watching my sister. I was assessing a hostile actor. The emotional part of my brain had shut down, and the analyst had taken over. The decision was not born of anger, but of necessity. It was a cold, precise calculation. Khloe was a threat to be managed, and the memorial would be the arena. This would not be an emotional confrontation. That was her territory, a battlefield where I had always lost. No, this would be a tactical operation. The objective was not revenge. It was threat neutralization. Later that night, I made a call on a secure line. My husband, Leo, answered on the first ring. My voice was flat, devoid of the emotion I knew he would have expected from a grieving wife. "Leo," I said, "I need to activate a domestic contingency. Protocol Raven's Nest." There was no hesitation on his end. No questioning. He didn't hear his wife. He heard Raven, his mission strategist. He understood immediately that this was not a request for comfort. It was a command. I laid out the plan. I needed his team. I needed them at the memorial, out of uniform, dispersed among the mourers like ghosts. Their role was purely psychological, a covert force of nature that I could make overt at the moment of my choosing. They were to be my assets. Leo's voice came back, a rock of stability in my swirling world. "Kope, Raven, the team is yours," he confirmed. "They'll be your eyes and ears. Dispersed, low profile, awaiting your signal. They'd be honored to have your back on home soil." After we hung up, I opened my laptop. Instead of looking at eulogies or floral arrangements, I pulled up a satellite image in the floor plan of the funeral home. My fingers moved across the keyboard with practiced ease, placing markers, mapping sight lines, and positioning my team. I wasn't a daughter planning a memorial. I was a strategist deploying a deterrent. Khloe thought she was bringing a hidden camera to a family drama. I was bringing a Tier 1 special operations team to a psyop. She had no idea she wasn't just entering a memorial hall. She was entering my world by my rules. We returned to the memorial service, and the room felt like a pressure cooker. The air was thick with the cloying sweetness of flowers and the unspoken tension of a family at war. My sister Khloe was in her element, playing the part of the devoted, heartbroken daughter. She moved through the crowd, accepting condolences with a perfectly crafted expression of sorrow, but I could feel her eyes on me constantly. She was a predator, circling, just waiting for me to show a moment of weakness. A single crack in my composure she could exploit. She was waiting for me to break. Little did she know, the ghosts she couldn't see were already in position. The members of Leo's team were scattered throughout the room, indistinguishable from the other men in dark suits. Shadows, waiting for a signal. And then it came, the vibration in my hand, the short, sharp text from my husband. Leo, don't react. Your sister Isis recording you. I didn't need the warning, but it was the designated trigger. My gaze lifted from my phone, and I began a slow, deliberate scan of the room. My face a carefully maintained mask of placid grief. My eyes met Leo's for a fraction of a second, a barely perceptible nod. Then my gaze swept on, briefly, locking with a man near the back, then another by the window. Each one met my eyes with a look of calm, absolute readiness. They were my assets, and they were primed. I lowered my eyes back to my phone. My thumb hovered, then typed the single word that would change everything. Raven. I hit send. For a full second, nothing happened. The efficient continued to speak in low, somber tones. Khloe's subtle smirk widened, thinking she had me. Then Leo stood up. He didn't make a sound. He simply rose to his full height. Assilon, powerful sentinel. A few people noticed, their heads turning. Then across the aisle, another man rose, mirroring Leo's posture. Exactly. Then two more in the back. In less than 5 seconds, a dozen men were on their feet. Assilon, unified wall of disciplined power. Their posture was identical, feet shoulder-width apart, hands clasped behind their backs. It wasn't an overtly military stance, but it was one of such profound coordinated unity that it sucked the air out of the room. The efficient's voice faltered and died. A single collective gasp went through the crowd as every head in the room swiveled away from the efficient, away from my father's portrait, away from Khloe, and locked directly onto me. I was the epicenter. I was the nexus of this sudden, terrifying display of power. In the dead silence, I heard a clatter. Khloe's phone had slipped from her numb fingers and hit the marble floor. I looked at her. Her face, which had been so smug just moments before, was a canvas of cycling horror. Confusion gave way to disbelief, which then curdled into raw, undiluted fear. Her power, built on whispers and manipulation, had just been publicly annihilated by a force she couldn't comprehend. She looked desperately toward our mother, her last bastion of support, but my mother wasn't looking at her. She was staring at me, her eyes wide with a dawning, shocking realization, as if she was seeing her daughter for the very first time. The entire foundation of our family's reality, the strong one and the weak one, the golden child and the ghost, had irrevocably shattered in the space of 10 seconds. Then Leo took 2 precise steps, placing himself at my side, not touching me, but standing as a silent guardian. He looked out over the stunned crowd, and his voice, though low and clear, carried to every corner of the silent hall. We're here to pay our respects to a patriot's family. The subtext was a cannon blast. They weren't just here, they were here with me. They were here for me. And in his careful choice of words, he had just declared to everyone who the true patriot's legacy resided with. It resided with the daughter who commanded the silent respect of warriors, not the one who commanded attention with drama. It was over. The board was cleared. My sister had spent her life trying to make me feel small. In the end, it only took one word, and 12 silent men for her to realize how small she truly was. The memorial service ended not with a peaceful prayer, but with 1,000 hushed, urgent whispers. The spell of public grief was broken, replaced by the electric crackle of scandal and speculation. My sister Khloe and my mother left quickly. A small, isolated island, in a sea of judgment. No one approached them. No one offered a final word of comfort. They simply walked out, shrouded in the suffocating silence they had tried to force upon me for years. As they departed, the atmosphere around me shifted. People didn't look at me with pity anymore. They looked at me with a new profound sense of awe and a little bit of fear. My father's old colleagues, men of power and influence, now approached me. Their demeanor completely changed. One of them, a retired general with sharp eyes and a stern jaw, took my hand. His grip was firm, respectful. "Aris," he said, his voice low. "Your father. He never told us." He paused, shaking his head slightly in disbelief. He would have been so proud. I offered him a small, sad smile. A part of me knew that my father, a man who only understood power he could see and touch, would never have truly understood my world of secrets and shadows. But the general's words weren't for him. They were for me. And in that moment, hearing that acknowledgement from a man my father respected, it felt like a chapter, long and painful, had finally clicked shut. The debt on my internal ledger had been paid in full. 6 months passed. 6 months of quiet, deliberate work, of building on the foundation I had laid for myself. My new world had no room for the ghosts of my past. My office, high in the rings of the Pentagon, had a door with a polished brass nameplate. Dr. Aris Thorne, Director, Strategic Analysis, Special Projects. The title was a world away from the boring government desk job my sister had so eagerly belittled. Now I sat at the head of a massive mahogany conference table, confidently leading a high-level briefing. Before me sat generals, admirals, and senior government officials, people who shaped global policy. My voice was steady as I laid out the intricate details of a complex geopolitical threat, weaving together data, human intelligence, and psychological profiling. Here in this room, my intellect wasn't just tolerated, it was a national asset. I was in complete command. After the briefing, my husband Leo was waiting for me in the corridor. He didn't need to say anything. The look of pride in his eyes said it all. We walked together through the long, quiet hallways, our steps falling into an easy, familiar rhythm. There was no need for grand pronouncements or emotional validation between us. Ours was a partnership of equals, forged in the fires of a world my family could never comprehend. This was my real family. This community built on competence, trust, and a mutual respect that ran deeper than blood. This quiet, purposeful walk with my husband. This was my peace. As we neared the exit, my phone buzzed in my pocket. I pulled it out, expecting a message from my deputy. But it was a name I hadn't seen in half a year. It was Khloe. The message was short. "Aris, I'm sorry. Can we please talk?" I read the words, and I waited for a feeling to surface. Anger, triumph, pity, something, but there was nothing. It was like reading a message from a stranger about a life I no longer lived. The words had no weight, no power. They were just pixels on a screen, an echo from a distant past that could no longer reach me. With my thumb, I pressed and held the message, and without a second thought, I tapped archive. I put the phone back in my pocket, silencing it for good. Leo glanced at me, a silent question in his eyes. I just shook my head slightly and gave him a small smile. He smiled back, understanding completely. I was done looking back. My sister believed family was defined by blood. I learned it's defined by who has your back when the world is watching. If you've ever had to find your strength when your family refused to see it, share your story below. In this community, your expertise is always recognized.